Okay, guys. I recorded class, and it had that stupid buzzing noise again. So I think I got it fixed, and I'm just going to kind of give you the solo lesson here without the rest of the class, which is fine. Just I'm tired. Anyway, what we're talking about today is kind of our segue into real biology, right? We've been talking about what science is. Well, biology is the science of living things. So what we better do is figure out, how do you tell? How do you tell if something is alive or not? And so I'm sure you can think of a few things, and I had students in class think of what they could as far as, what are the universal characteristics of life? What can you say is true of every single living thing we've ever seen? And they came up with a lot of the big ones easily. But what they also come up with, and what I'm sure you are too now that you're thinking about it, is some that really don't pass what I call the tree test. You'll come up with something like, well, all living things breathe. Do they? The trees breathe? I mean, if you define breathe as taking air in and then taking it out to get the oxygen out of it, trees don't. I mean, they have holes in their leaves where air kind of can diffuse in and out, but they don't do that actively, so that doesn't count. You say all things eat. Well, do trees eat? No, they use sunlight to excite their chlorophyll, and then they use that to build glucose, and then they break the glucose down for energy. So we kind of have to cook those things down that you're thinking of, like moving or breathing or eating, into what you're really getting done with them. And that's how we'll figure out how to say it in terms of something that passes the tree test. Anyway, let's start with a couple of the easy ones. Number one, duh, right? This is kind of like the main one. This is like, you have to. If you don't, well, not only do you die, but if you can't reproduce, if your species can't reproduce, what do? They go extinct. So yeah, everything has to reproduce. You got to be able to make more. And it turns out that comes in two big types. I'm sure you know that there is such a thing as asexual reproduction that involves just one parent and makes exact copies that are genetically identical. It can be as simple as your a one-celled organism, you copy all your DNA and then bloop, you split into two. Or as complicated as some animals can actually do this, where like it would be like if I were to start like growing another Mr. Sandro out of my shoulder, and then all of a sudden, after a while, there was two Mr. Sandros like me next to me, and we were genetically identical. That'd be terrifying, I know, but that's what asexual reproduction looks like on a larger level. Then there's sexual reproduction, two parents. It's different, right? It's asexual has some advantages. It's easier, it's cheaper in terms of energy. The big advantage that sexual reproduction gives you biologically is variety. Not only are you combining two different parents' DNA, but each parent is shuffling it up before they put it into the offspring, and so you get different kids. They're all different from each other and from you. It introduces a tremendous amount of variety, and that really is kind of what sped up evolution on Earth. Okay, so breathing and eating, what we're going to cook them down to is this. You breathe so that you can use oxygen to release energy from your food. You eat so that you can get food inside you that gets energy released from it in respiration. We're going to call it use of energy, because plants have to do that too. Not only do they make the sugars, they break the sugars down. That's use of energy. We'll use a fancy word, metabolism, for it, but you've heard that word, right? Metabolism, like, oh my God, I can't stand her. She can eat whatever she wants, as much as she wants, and she never gains a pound. She has a high metabolism, right? So that's the word. Every living thing does it in some way or another, using energy to get their jobs done. Every living thing we've ever seen, and this doesn't mean that there's not something on some other planet that does it a different way, but the chemical that we use as our genetic code, as our informational molecule, is called DNA. Rounding out the first half, evolution, which you think a lot of things when you hear evolution, but in terms of this, it is a very simple thing. It is a fact of life, which is living populations change genetically over time. If I check in with the population of squirrels out my window here, I'm next to some trees here, and there's a population of squirrels that's been there since I started teaching. Had I taken a genetic sample of those squirrels in 2001 when I started, and then I took another genetic sample of the population now, 20 years later, the genetics would be different. They've changed over time. They look different. Their genes are different. That change is evolution. That's just something that happens to every living population we've ever seen. What we'll study eventually is the mechanisms that drive it, right? Like natural selection and sexual selection and genetic drift and things like that. But at its heart, evolution equals change, genetic change over time. All right, halfway there. Next, this is one where, you say things like, all living things move, right? Well, not really. Trees don't exactly move. But in the example I always use in class is I chuck a marker at somebody's head, usually somebody who I think is pretty coordinated, and they almost always catch it or at least block it. And that's a very complicated response. Like if you were to try to program a robot to catch a spinning marker flying at their head, you would have to know enough calculus to melt your brain. But that kid in the corner just did it in his head in enough time to catch the marker, even to like absorb enough shocks that the marker didn't bounce off of him. Amazing. Super complex response. Or it can be as simple as you poke it with a needle in it and it crawls away, right? It's a jellyfish or whatever. Or it can be as simple as that thing swims towards the light, or that tree's roots always grow towards water. Everything responds in some way to its environment. Now, one more word that goes with this, the thing that causes the response, the marker flying at the kid's head, the needle poking the critter, or the light that the thing swims away from, stimulus. Anything causing a response is a stimulus. Moving on, this is kind of like DNA. We happen to be made, and every living thing we've ever seen happens to be made of these weird little, explaining to someone what cells are is hard. I learned that when I tried to explain to my 6-year-old who had come home with the word cells. Hey, Daddy, what are cells? Best I could do was, well, they're kind of like these little bags of goo, really tiny, too small to see, but you're made of a whole bunch of them, and the ones on the outside are dead so that you don't feel like goo. But on the inside, that's what you are. And I don't know that he came out of that feeling any better, but it's true. That's basically what they are. These cell membranes that you have on the outside of your cells are kind of like flexible fluid, and the stuff inside is very jelly-like, and that's you. The only reason you don't feel like that is because you got this kind of pseudo armor, a dead layer of cells on the outside. All right. It's also true that you can be alive with just one cell. So a unicellular organism counts. Bacteria, protists, some fungi are unicellular, and that's all it takes. But of course, we're more in tune with the big, complicated multicellular organisms like us. This is a complicated one. Okay, no, it's not. I'm going to give you an example. Think of a day in January, like one of those days where it's like almost cold enough to close school, and it's like, it's like 3 degrees out. And I want you to picture me going out in shorts and a t-shirt. Think about the things that my body is going to do in response to that. First thing, yep, I'm going to feel cold, right? That's not real. Feeling cold or hot isn't a real thing. That's your nerve endings telling your brain something, and your brain telling you, hey, you should go inside. It's too cold out. Go inside. That's your body trying to change your behavior, right? Next, what do? The hair on my arm stands up. Totally useless. But it wasn't for your ancestors. Your ancestors were hairier. And when you're hairy, when you're really hairy and all your hair stands up, think of it like your sweater getting thicker. Those air spaces insulate you, keeps you warmer. Next thing that happens, I start to shiver, right? Well, that's my body taking control of my muscles and making them vibrate uncontrollably to create some heat to keep me warm. Finally, my brain starts saying, okay, this guy's an idiot. He's not going inside. We got to cut our losses. Fingers and toes aren't important anymore, people. Let's shunt the blood flow. Let's move the blood from the extremities into the really important parts, like his brain and his heart, so he doesn't die. And hopefully he'll come to his senses when he starts seeing his fingers turning white and blue, and then feeling like they're going to fall off and then being totally numb. All of this is a great example of homeostasis. The book calls it maintaining your internal balance, but I think it's a better way to say it, keeping your insides different from your outsides, right? Like And it doesn't just work for cold. Think about heat. Very similar progression of events. If I go outside in 110-degree weather wearing a coat, right? I'm gonna feel hot and uncomfortable. I'm gonna start to sweat, which the evaporative cooling cools me down, right? All these things are gonna happen to try to keep my insides cooler because my outsides are trying to make me hot. You're very, watery inside. Your outside is very dry. And you're constantly doing things. Your body's making you do things, making you feel thirsty, drinking so that you'll drink water to keep your insides different, wetter than your outsides. It's all homeostasis. Anything that's alive has to do that, or its environment eventually breaks it down. Hopefully that makes sense. That's maybe the most challenging one of the bunch. After that, it's easy. Everything grows, right? Everything starts smaller than it is, even a single cell, because it came from a larger cell that divided in two. Well, its first job is to go back up to normal size. Then a lot of critters actually get more complex as well. That's called development. So growth is just getting bigger. Development is getting more complex. So hopefully those make sense, because you're now going to need to use them on a kind of thing. I'm going to call it a thing because it's a thing that scientists really don't completely agree on classifying as alive or not alive. It's a very relevant thing right now. It's a thing that, in fact, has changed your entire lives and is now causing you to be at home instead of at school. I'm talking, of course, about viruses. Viruses in general are real weird. So you're going to go to chapter 20 in your books, and you are going to read some stuff about viruses. The worksheet will guide you in just a few things that you need to learn about viruses before you start to hold up the 8 characteristics of life and start to answer on this sheet how and why viruses meet or don't meet those 8 characteristics of life. Okay, that's the assignment. It's going to drop in with this video. Nice short one today, and I hope you're all doing very well. Reminder that the sample essays that I assigned yesterday are due tomorrow, and that your test is going to be on Friday in GradeCam. If you've lost your GradeCam little code password thing, it's in your email. Just search in your Gmail for my name, and you will find an email that I sent you with your GradeCam code. Okay? Hope you guys are having a great day. Take care of yourselves. Bye.